Welcome to Novella Station, where every tale begins with a whisper and ends with a scream. Tonight, a new story unfolds, and it won't let you sleep easy. Today's story name is The Pareidolia Prophecies. Prologue. I've always found faces in things. Not on purpose. It's just how the world arranges itself for me. The paisley pattern on an old curtain becomes a host of sleeping foxes. The crack in the diner's linoleum floor is a sly, winking serpent. The water stain on the ceiling above my bed, in the room I had as a boy, wasn't just a shapeless blotch. It was a man with a kind eye and a quiet mouth, and he watched over me. Most people experience this, I think. They see a man in the moon or a castle in the clouds. They smile, point it out, and then the moment passes. The pattern dissolves back into randomness. But for me, it never dissolved. The faces stayed. The figures held their shape. Once I saw the old knight in the grain of the oak door, I couldn't unsee him. He was just there, a part of the door, and a part of the quiet world I carried with me. I used to think it was just a quirk, an overactive imagination, a lonely kid's way of making silent walls feel less empty. It's easier to believe that. Safer. I found the word for it years later, buried in a lexicon, pareidolia, a psychological term for a harmless fancy, for seeing the familiar in the random. It was a relief, that cold, clinical word. It explained everything. But it explained nothing about why the gargoyle in the hearthstone crack wept before a loss, or why the knight in the table grain turned his head away from danger. A fancy doesn't guide. It doesn't warn. And lately, the fancy feels less like a trick of my mind, and more like a signal I am only now learning to hear. Every secret has a pulse, every shadow a voice. If you crave more twists than the night can hold, step into Novella Station, where stories breathe danger and endings are never what they seem. Chapter 1. My childhood was not a pleasant one. I grew up in the kind of dysfunctional family that belongs in a tragic novel, The Full House of Misery, with 3 aces and 2 kings. There was my father, a drunkard, abusive and sadistic. My mother, Brenda, a helpless, sobbing mess. My grandmother, whose meanness was a quiet, constant poison. And then there was my paternal uncle, snake-like and sly, with his own family in tow, including his son, Milton, who served as my personal tormentor and living nightmare. The only saving grace in this cesspool was that our family, the Millers, were not poor. We were not rolling in money, but neither did we pinch pennies over daily necessities. My basic needs, food, clothing, education, were always provided for. And so, like any other respectable scion of Hilton Town's so-called reputable families, I was sent away to Hebron Academy, a boarding school, my sanctuary. Nate, winter will be here soon. Have you packed your school blazers? Your wool socks? Do you have enough for meals, for your pocket money? It was my mother, asking for the 3rd time. Her voice was thin, frayed at the edges. She stood in the doorway of my room, wringing her hands on her apron. I knew she was unwilling to let me go, not because she'd miss me, but because she'd be left alone in this poisonous swamp. I'd have bet my entire meager savings that, given the chance, she'd trade places with me in a heartbeat. I've packed everything, Mom, I said, not looking up from my suitcase. I was folding a sweater, my movements precise. If I kept my eyes on the task, I wouldn't have to see the bruise flowering like a sickly shadow just above her wrist. A floorboard creaked in the hall behind her. We both froze, a single, shared instinct. The moment stretched, taut and silent. Then the heavy tread passed, moving toward the stairs. The spell broke. Her shoulders slumped, not with relief, but with a weariness so deep it seemed to settle in her bones. She took a hesitant step into the room, her eyes darting to the hallway before settling back on me. "You'll write?" she whispered. "Every week." I promised, though we both knew the letters would be bland, empty things. Words were dangerous. They could be found, read, used against you. She nodded, a quick, bird-like motion, and pressed a small, folded envelope into my hand. It was warm from her grip. "For extras," she murmured, before turning and slipping back into the dim corridor, as silent as a ghost. I waited until her footsteps faded before looking down at the envelope. Inside, I knew, would be a few carefully hoarded bills. Money she'd scraped together from heaven knows where, likely at her own expense. The weight of it in my palm felt heavier than lead. I finished packing and closed the suitcase with a definitive click. As I did, my gaze drifted to the wall beside my window. The wallpaper was old, its floral pattern faded and peeling at the seams. But in the particular slant of the afternoon light, the stains and tears resolved, as they always did, into a familiar pattern. There, in the paisley and water damage, was the kind-eyed man from the ceiling of my old apartment. And beside him, the sleek, elongated form of the fox from the parlor curtain. They were silent, just watching, but their presence was a comfort. They were my counsel, my silent guardians. And tomorrow, they would remain here, in the very walls of this unhappy house. I would be alone at Hebron, or so I thought, as eager as I was to return to my sanctuary. For Milton, that pig, it was like a pig being led to slaughter. I believe that's why he came to unleash his torment on me. The thud of the suitcase latch was still echoing in the quiet room when the sanctuary of the doorway darkened. Milton leaned against the frame, a lazy, poisonous smile already in place. He didn't need to knock. In this house, my room was considered an extension of his domain. "Packing your rags, are we?" he drawled, his eyes, the same cold gray as his father's, sweeping over me. "Off to play the little scholar. Tell me, does that blazer still smell of me? I think I bled on the elbow during rugby. Gives it character." He was talking about the winter blazer my mother had quietly taken from the donation pile Milton's family had made to the church rummage sale. It was a size too big, and yes, there was a faint, rust-colored ghost of a stain near the left cuff. I kept folding a sweater, my fingers pressing into the soft wool. "Don't rise. He's a crack in the floorboard. A ugly, twisted knot in the wood. See the pattern and let it be." My silence, my focus on the task, was the wrong response. It denied him the flinch he craved. His smile tightened. He pushed off the door frame and ambled into the room, his presence making the space feel smaller, fouler. He went straight for my half-packed backpack on the bed. "Let's see what essentials the great Nathaniel Miller requires for his intellectual exile," he sneered, his hands, broad and cruel, plunging into the main compartment. He began pulling items out, holding them up for a mock inspection before dropping them carelessly to the floor. Standard issue pencils. How droll. "A notebook. Property of Nathan," he read aloud in a simpering, high-pitched voice. Then his fingers closed on something else. He pulled out the small, careful package my mother had wrapped for me. A tin of her shortbread, the one thing she could make that was always perfect, always sweet. Mummy's little care package," Milton cooed, his voice dropping into a false, saccharine sympathy that was worse than his shouting. "Brenda's famous sadness cookies. Does she bake the tears right in, Nate? Is that the secret ingredient? The recipe must be 1 cup of flour, 2 of utter despair." A coldness, sharper than any winter Hebron could conjure, settled in my gut. I stopped folding. The room seemed to tilt, the light shifting. Milton, oblivious, shook the tin. "She's probably in the kitchen right now, weeping into the mixing bowl. A sobbing mess making biscuits for her useless son. What a pair you are." The sniveling ghost and her pathetic, face-seeing freak of a... I did my best to drown him out. There was no point in confronting him. It would only add gasoline to the fire. I focused on the faded floral pattern on the wall, letting my vision blur until Milton's shape became a smudge of malice in the periphery. And then, the pattern changed. The shapes within it, the kind man, the watchful fox, didn't just hold their form. They sharpened. The fox's muzzle seemed to elongate, its gaze fixing on Milton's temple. The kind man's eyes, usually so gentle, narrowed into slits of disapproval. I stared until my eyes burned. That's when I heard it, a soft, gentle voice, threading its way through the ugly noise of Milton's taunts. "Take your report card to the study," it said. I was confused, frozen by the sheer surreality of the command. Like any sane person, I was caught between an inability to comprehend and an inability to act. The voice urged once more, its tone gentle but threaded with a new note, a coaxing insistence. "Don't be afraid. Just take your report card to the study." For a dizzying second, I thought I'd finally cracked. The command was nonsensical, unconnected to the venom filling my room. But the voice held a quiet insistence that cut through my panic. I looked at Milton, his mouth still moving, his words now just a wet, nasty noise. The fox on the wall, sharp as a pen stroke, was now looking not at Milton, but directly at me. Its gaze flicked, deliberate and urgent, toward my desk. My desk held organized towers of schoolbooks and a few scattered pieces of stationery. Pens, pencils, a table lamp. Under the lamp's brass base lay a folded piece of cardstock, glossy paper adorned with the Hebron Academy crest. Beneath the crest, in severe block letters, was written, "Report card." I broke our stalemate. I turned my back on Milton, a cardinal sin, and walked to my desk. He spluttered, his monologue derailed. "What can't take it? Going to cry into your homework, you little." I picked up the cardstock. It felt heavier than it should. Milton, unable to comprehend this deviation from my usual cowering, followed me as if in a trance of disbelief. "What are you doing?" "I'm talking to you." But I was already moving, the report card a cold, smooth tile in my hand. The Miller family study was on the ground floor. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I descended the stairs, each step taking me further from the known battleground of my room and into the heart of the dragon's den. Milton's confused footsteps echoed behind me, a pale shadow of his usual bravado. The study door was ajar. The room beyond was a temple to cold order, lined with glass-fronted bookcases holding leather-bound volumes that were never read. The air smelled of lemon polish, old paper, and a faint, acrid hint of my grandmother's perfume. Seated behind the vast, empty expanse of the mahogany desk was Dorothy Miller, the matriarch. She was studying a Miller Corp financial report, her reading glasses perched on the end of her sharp nose, a silver pen poised in her bony hand. She saw me in the doorway and went utterly still. The pen stopped. Her eyes, the color of flint, lifted from the columns of numbers and fixed on me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated stupefaction. In the 10 years I'd lived under this roof, I had never voluntarily crossed this threshold. I was a ghost meant to haunt the upper floors, not materialize in her sanctum. Seeing me visibly shivering in the doorway, my cowardice written in every trembling line, her initial shock curdled into familiar contempt. She opened her mouth, no doubt to rebuke me back into the shadows where I belonged. But then her gaze dropped to the glossy cardstock in my hand. Curiosity, that most dangerous of instincts, flickered in her eyes. She closed her mouth and gave a single, minute nod, a queen permitting a petitioner to approach. I stepped into the room, the Persian rug swallowing the sound of my footsteps. Milton hovered in the doorway, a silent, baffled spectator. I stopped before the desk, the vast, polished surface between us a chasm of mutual disdain. Without a word, I placed the report card on the leather blotter and slid it toward her. She looked from my face to the card, then slowly set her silver pen aside. She picked up the report card, her movements precise. She opened it. The silence that followed was different from any I had known. It was not the silence of dismissal, but of absorption. Her eyes scanned the page. Then they scanned it again. Her stern, unmovable expression did not change, but the atmosphere in the room underwent a subtle, seismic shift. The contempt bled away, replaced by something calculating, reassessing. She saw the straight A's. She read the glowing, specific commendations from his teachers. A formidable and original intellect, demonstrates exceptional analytical precision, a quiet leader among his peers. Finally, she looked up. Her flinty eyes bored into mine, but the fury I expected wasn't there. Instead, I saw a fracture, a brief, stunning crack in the granite of her composure. She was not looking at the useless freak. She was trying, and failing, to reconcile the cowering boy before her with the words on the page. A formidable and original intellect. The boy was trembling. Demonstrates exceptional analytical precision. He wouldn't meet her eyes. A quiet leader among his peers. In this house, he was a ghost. A strange, unfamiliar pang twisted behind her breastbone. It wasn't affection. It was the shock of cognitive dissonance, edged with a sudden, profound sadness. This was Vincent's son. Her favorite, her brightest star. Vincent, whose own brilliant mind had curdled into cunning, whose charm had soured into cruelty. She had married him to Brenda from the fallen Arkwright house, a girl with quiet grace, hoping she might be an anchor. But Brenda had been a weeping willow, bowing under the first storm. That damned letter from her past had been the final gust that broke Vincent completely, sending him spiraling into the drunkard he was today. And this result of that catastrophic union was standing before her. Not with his father's arrogant fire or his mother's vapid sorrow, but with this silent, trembling competence. He had done what his parents could not. He had excelled. He had built something of value in secret, far from the rod of this house. The sadness did not crystallize into curiosity. It liquefied, becoming a flood that breached a dam she'd built years ago. She wasn't just looking at a report. She was looking at him. The line of his jaw, the wary set of his eyes. It was Vincent, but stripped of all her son's defiant fire. This was a younger version rendered in shades of fear and neglect. A ghost of potential, shivering in a borrowed blazer. Her frozen heart gave a single, painful ache. When had she last spoken to him? Truly spoken? She couldn't recall. After Arthur died and Vincent began his long, disgraceful unraveling, she had seized the family helm with iron resolve. To survive the disappointment, she had walled off everything associated with her failed son, his weeping wife, this silent boy. She had buried them in the same mental vault where she kept her grief and turned the key. But now, confronted with this tangible proof of excellence, Vincent's son's excellence, the lock shattered. A tear, hot and utterly alien, tracked through the powder on her cheek. Then another. Her hands, which had signed million-dollar contracts without a tremor, shook as she uncapped her pen. The definitive click sounded weak to her own ears. She scrawled her name in the guardian's signature box, the ink blotted by a falling droplet. The act felt less like reclamation and more like a feeble, decade-overdue apology. She closed the booklet, the glossy cover smearing, and pushed it back across the vast desk. Her voice, when she found it, was a frayed whisper, stripped of all its armor. Keep it up. That was all she could manage. 3 words that held a universe of regret. I was flabbergasted. The Iron Matriarch was crying. The woman who could wither Milton's father with a glance, who spoke in decrees, was crumbling behind the desk. The terrifying, sharp-tongued figure of my childhood was gone, replaced by a frail, weeping old woman. The disconnect was so violent it left me reeling. This wasn't a transaction. This was an unveiling. There was a history here, a story of hurt I knew nothing about, and I had just stumbled into its epilogue. She seemed to realize her own vulnerability. With a sudden, harsh movement, she swiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, the gesture angry and ashamed. Her eyes, now red-rimmed but hardening again, flickered past me to the doorway. Nathaniel, leave. Then her gaze locked onto Milton, who was still gawking, pale with confusion. Her voice regained a sliver of its old steel, laced with a new, dangerous venom. Milton, you will bring your report card to my desk. Now. The blood drained from Milton's face so completely I thought he might faint. His report card was a sea of angry red marks, his teacher's remarks scathing and unforgiving. His moment of intended schadenfreude had inverted, perfectly and terribly. I took my report card, the ink now blurred with more than just wetness, and fled the study. The hollow quiet of the upstairs hall felt different this time. The voice did not speak. It didn't need to. The lesson was no longer about currency or strategy. It was far more profound. My silent counsel hadn't just given me a weapon or made me interesting. It had orchestrated a confrontation with a wounded dragon, and in doing so, showed me the crack in its scales. It had shown me that the frozen architecture of this family was built on fault lines of pain, and it had handed me, not a sword, but a mirror. The shiver that ran through me was the chill of understanding. The game was not just about survival or power. It was about history, and I had just been given a glimpse of the board that existed long before I was even a piece upon it. Back in the hollow quiet of the upstairs hall, the voice did not speak again. But I didn't need it to. The lesson was searingly clear, and it was twofold. My silent counsel understood the battlefield. It knew the currency here was cold, measurable value. It had just taught me how to mint some. The rest of the day was unnaturally calm. A thick, waiting silence had settled over the house, broken only by the distant, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It was the quiet of held breath. It didn't last. The first cry from the study was a sharp, startled yelp. Then came the low, seismic rumble of my grandmother's voice, a sound I had never heard aimed at anyone but my own parents. Words were indistinct, but their texture was clear, flint-sharp, cold, and utterly damning. Milton's voice, usually so full of bluster, was a high, pleading whine that cracked into a sob. I stood frozen in my room, not needing to see to understand. The report card, the sea of red, the comments. I could imagine the precise phrase from his PE teacher that would have been the match to the tinder. Exhibits bullying and thuggish tendencies unbecoming of this institution. And the final, unforgivable indictment. We question the values being reinforced at home. Those weren't comments on a page. They were a declaration of war on the Miller family's carefully curated reputation, and Dorothy Miller was the general. The storm expanded. I heard my Uncle George's voice, a hurried, placating baritone trying to pour oil on the inferno. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. My grandmother's fury, already white-hot, found a new, richer fuel. Her voice cut through the door, clear as a scalpel for one terrible moment. You dare speak of control? You, who raised this little brute. Your failure is the only signature on this document. Then came the sound no one in this house ever wanted to hear. George being disciplined. Not with cries, but with a silence more terrible. The sound of a grown man being reduced to a scolded boy, his muttered apologies swallowed by her relentless, quiet fury. The calm that returned later was different. It was the hollow, exhausted silence after a bomb has detonated. A new order had been asserted, and the lines of power had been redrawn in fire and shame. In my room, I listened to that silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was pregnant with consequence. My flawless report card lay on my desk, a simple piece of cardstock that had somehow become a seismic charge. The old beat-up sedan the staff usually used was nowhere to be seen. Instead, idling at the foot of the porch with a deep, respectful purr, was his grandfather's car. The vintage Bentley, a sleek silhouette in polished midnight blue, was Arthur Miller's beloved chariot. It was a relic, a moving shrine almost no one dared to touch, let alone use. Nathan stood frozen, his single suitcase suddenly feeling absurdly shabby. The family butler, Sebastian, gave a slight, knowing nod and took the case, loading it with care into the pristine trunk. For the journey, Master Nathaniel, Sebastian said, his voice low. He then pressed a slim, black bank card into Nathan's hand. And this, Madam prepared it. For your extras. The plastic was cool and weighty. Nathan's fingers closed around it, his throat tight. He looked up, his gaze instinctively drawn to the first-floor window of the east wing. She was there. Dorothy Miller stood framed in the glass, a tall, rigid silhouette against the light of her room. But her face, usually a mask of stoic granite, held something else, a perceptible, quiet warmth in the set of her mouth, a softening around the eyes that were watching him. Not the asset, but the boy leaving. Startled, Nathan hastily offered a deep, formal bow towards the window. When he straightened, she was gone, the curtain falling back into place. He slid into the Bentley's butter-soft leather interior, the door closing with a sound like a vault ceiling. The 3-hour drive to Hebron passed in a haze of quiet engine noise and rolling hills. Sebastian did not speak until the Academy's familiar gray spires appeared on the horizon. As he guided the Bentley through the wrought iron gates and toward the dormitories, he finally cleared his throat, his eyes fixed ahead. Master Nathaniel, he began, the words hesitant, uncharacteristic for the usually impeccable butler. I would ask you not to hate her. The madam. Nathan looked at the back of Sebastian's head, stunned. A heart, Sebastian continued softly, pulling to a smooth stop at the curb, that has been wounded by the death of her husband, shattered by her own son, the son she loved most, and bent double by the weight of a family's survival. Such a heart becomes afraid. It is afraid of every new closeness, for fear it, too, will be broken or lost. It is not coldness. It is a fortress built around a ruin. He turned then, meeting Nathan's eyes in the rearview mirror. His own held a depth of old, loyal sorrow. She saw you today, truly saw you. That is not a small thing. With that, he exited the car to unload the trunk, the moment gone as if it had never happened. Nathan sat in the silent, scented leather, the bank card in his pocket and the butler's words in his soul, feeling the first, fragile thread of a bridge stretching back across the frozen moat of home. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Find more at Novella Station. Chapter 2. The beat-up sedan looked pathetic after the Bentley. It coughed to a stop at the curb, and Milton unfolded himself from the back seat. His face was a storm cloud, sporting a spectacular purple and yellow-black eye. He moved stiffly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets in a way that didn't hide the angry red whilst peeking from his cuffs. Nathan saw him from the dormitory steps. A cold stone dropped into his gut. He knows. It didn't take long. As Nathan fumbled with his key at his dorm room door, shadows fell over him. Milton and two of his cronies, hulking boys from the rugby team, encircled him, blocking the light. "Look who it is," Milton hissed, his voice raw. "The little snitch. The teacher's pet. You think you're clever, don't you?" Nathan kept his eyes on the oak door, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew pleading was useless. He was cornered. And then he saw it. In the rich, swirling grain of the oak, the pattern resolved. It wasn't just a random shape anymore. It was the old knight from the table at home, his helmeted head turned, his gaze fixed directly on Nathan. The image was so sharp, so present, it stole his breath. "You ignoring me, freak?" Milton snarled, stepping closer. He drew his fist back, the movement making him wince as it pulled at the welts on his back. The cronies grinned, anticipating the violence. The voice that spoke was not the gentle whisper of the floral man. It was deep, gravelly, like stones grinding together, and it came directly from the door. "Move 3 steps to your right." This time, Nathan didn't hesitate. He didn't question. As Milton's fist began its arc, Nathan shuffled 3 quick, sidling steps to the right along the wall. "Trying to run away?" Milton shouted, a dark glee in his voice as he lunged after him, his swing now aimed at empty air. He stumbled, off balance. The movement, however, had perfectly placed Milton and his cronies in the center of the broad, lead-paned window at the end of the hallway. A window that looked directly into the office of Headmaster Sterling. A sharp, authoritative rap on the glass made all 4 of them freeze. They turned. Headmaster Sterling stood framed in his own window, his expression one of icy disapproval. He had seen the entire attempted assault, clear as day. His finger jabbed, pointing first at Milton, then at his 2 friends, before curling in an unmistakable come-here gesture. Milton's face, already bruised, went slack with horror. The glee in his eyes snuffed out, replaced by the dawning terror of a second, very public, disciplinary disaster. Nathan, still pressed against the wall where the knight had directed him, slowly let out the breath he'd been holding. The grain of the door seemed to soften, the knight's fierce expression easing into something like a satisfied nod. The voice did not speak again. It didn't need to. The lesson was echoing in the sudden, panicked silence of the hall. "Listen, and you will not fight alone." The days at Hebron Academy settled into a monotonous, safe routine. Nathan's friend circle was small but solid. Leo Vernon, with his dry wit and encyclopedic knowledge of comic books, and Isabella Masters, whose sharp observations were softened by a fierce loyalty. One afternoon, he was engrossed in a physics lecture, a subject he'd come to love for its clean, predictable laws. The professor's voice was a steady drone about quantum states when another voice cut through, jolting him from his focus. "Right, don't do it. Wait it out on a slip and pass it to Nora Blackwood." Nathan stiffened, his pen freezing over his notebook. He looked around the lecture hall. Leo was doodling in a margin. Isabella was taking meticulous notes. No one else had flinched. His eyes dropped to the floor. Near his foot, a crack in the ancient linoleum had spread, collecting dust and shadow. Within that jagged line, the pattern resolved. A sinuous, coiled shape, a snake, its head raised as if to whisper. This time, there was no crisis. No Milton swinging a fist. The suggestion was absurd, unanchored to any visible threat. "Why?" he breathed, his lips barely moving. "What is the meaning of this?" The dust around the crack seemed to shift. The snake's pattern didn't change, but he felt its attention like a pressure. "Just do it." The voice was a sly, silken thread in his mind. Then, impossibly, one of the cracks near the snake's head curved upward. A wink, heart hammering against his ribs, not from fear now, but from the sheer, surreal weight of the command. Nathan tore a corner from a blank page. His hand moved almost without his consent, scribbling the words, "Don't do it. Wait it out." He glanced up. Nora Blackwood sat 3 rows ahead, her posture rigid, her blonde hair a bright curtain hiding her face. He'd never spoken to her. She moved in a different, louder orbit. Folding the slip once, he tapped Leo's shoulder. Pass this to Nora, he whispered, his voice tight. Leo raised an eyebrow, but, seeing Nathan's expression, simply nodded and nudged the girl in front of him. The note traveled forward, hand over hand, a paper secret snaking through the rows. Nathan saw Nora's hand reach back to receive it. She unfolded it under her desk. He watched the line of her shoulders. They jerked, just once, as if struck. She didn't turn around. She just stared at the note, then slowly crumpled it in her fist. The rest of the lecture was a blur. The bell rang, scattering students. As Nora stood, Nathan saw her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She met his gaze across the emptying rows. There was no anger there, just a deep, shocked confusion and a flicker of something like desperation. She didn't approach him. She just turned and walked out, the crumpled note held tight in her hand. Leo slung his bag over his shoulder. What was that about, Nate? A love note, he joked. Isabella, ever perceptive, was watching Nathan's face. You look like you've seen a ghost. Nathan shook his head, unable to form words. He hadn't seen a ghost. He'd delivered a message from a crack in the floor. And as he packed his own books, a cold certainty settled in his stomach. This wasn't about defense anymore. This was intervention. The patterns weren't just protecting him. They were using him to alter the course of events he knew nothing about. And the life he had just turned upside down, he realized with a sinking feeling, might very well have been Nora Blackwood's. Nora caught him on the gravel path between the library and the dormitories, under the skeletal branches of an old oak. Her usual cool composure was gone, replaced by a raw, frantic energy. Miller. A word. Nathan froze, his books clutched to his chest. Nora. Hi. She didn't bother with pleasantries. She thrust the crumpled slip of paper toward him, her hand trembling. How do you know about this? Her voice was low, urgent. What do you mean, wait it out? Wait out what exactly? His mind blanked. He glanced desperately at the oak tree's trunk, the flaking bark. For a heartbeat, he saw nothing. Then, a pattern formed, a cluster of knots and moss that looked like 3 small, grinning faces. They weren't mocking him. They seemed amused, enjoying his squirming discomfort. No help was coming. I don't know specifics, he stammered, scrambling for a safe, vague truth. It was just a feeling. A bad feeling. About rushing into things. A feeling, she echoed, her voice cracking with disbelief. You pass me a note like a death sentence because of a feeling? My parents are on the phone every night. The contracts are drafted. The announcements are being prepared. She cut herself off, realizing she was saying too much. Nathan was utterly lost. Contracts? Announcements? He knew the Blackwoods were rich, of course, everyone did. But he was a miller from Hilton Town. His world was local politics and property. He had no concept of the Blackwood Incorporated empire, a financial behemoth whose tendrils stretched across the nation, nor that Nora was its intended sacrificial heiress, a strategic resource to be married off for alliance. Her brother, Maxim, was the true heir. She was the spare, to be traded. I just thought, sometimes, when things feel inevitable, waiting can change the landscape, he said, parroting the kind of vague wisdom the kind man in the wallpaper might offer. New information can appear, options you didn't see before. Nora stared at him, searching his face for deceit. She saw only clueless, genuine anxiety. It was infuriating, and somehow, more convincing than slick certainty. You have no idea what you're talking about, do you? She said, the fight draining from her voice, replaced by exhaustion. You're just guessing. Maybe, he admitted softly. But it was a strong guess. She looked down at the note again, then back at him, her expression unreadable. My grandfather always says the market has moods, that you can feel a crash coming in your bones if you listen. She let out a shaky breath. Is that what this is? A mood? Nathan said nothing. He just held her gaze, hoping his silence looked like wisdom instead of the sheer, panicked void it was. Nora slowly refolded the note, tucking it into her blazer pocket as if it were a sacred text. If this is some stupid prank, Miller, I will bury you. It's not, he said, the certainty in his own voice surprising him. She gave one last, long look, then turned and walked away, her posture once more straight and unapproachable. But the frantic dread was gone, replaced by a simmering, calculating tension. Nathan slumped against the oak tree. The grinning faces in the bark had softened back into random patterns. He had just meddled in the life of a financial princess with a note from a floor snake, armed with nothing but vague advice. A new, chilling thought dawned. His silent counsel wasn't just interested in schoolyard bullies or family dramas. Nathan stumbled into the dormitory common room, his mind still reeling from the confrontation with Nora. Leo was sprawled in an armchair, a comic book obscuring his face. "Well, if it isn't the campus mystic," Leo said, not lowering the comic. "Heard you and Blackwood were having a dramatic little chat by the oak. Passing love notes or drafting a peace treaty." "Something like that," Nathan muttered, heading straight for the stairs to his room. Leo lowered the comic. "Whoa, that was a seriously half-hearted comeback. You okay, Nate? You look like you've been arguing with a ghost." Nathan paused on the bottom step, leaning heavily on the banister. "I wish I knew what was happening, Leo. I really do. Cryptic. Very cryptic. You want to. Not tonight." Nathan cut him off, more sharply than he intended. "Sorry. Just not tonight." He trudged up to his room, the weight of the day settling on his shoulders. He fell onto his bed, still in his blazer, and stared at the ceiling. The familiar, soothing water stain was there, but it offered no comfort now. The game had changed. As if summoned by the thought, the plaster beside his bed shivered. Not a crack, but a shift in the texture. Shadows and bumps coalesced, deepened. A face emerged, but not the kind man or the watchful fox. This one was horned, with a gaping maw and eyes like smoking pits. A textbook demon, rendered in crumbling, off-white plaster. Nathan's breath hitched, but he didn't scream. He was past that. The demon's mouth didn't move, but the voice filled the room. It wasn't a roar or a snarl. It was calm, soothing even, but its words were clipped and absolute. "Tomorrow, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Go to Myriad Medicines on Wellington Street. You will bring the owner, Charlie, to see Nora Blackwood's grandfather. Do not fail. Pay whatever is required. Miss whatever you must." This is not a suggestion. The voice faded. The demonic face held its form for a moment longer, a silent sentinel, before the shadows relaxed and it bled back into the random texture of the wall. Nathan lay perfectly still, the command echoing in the silence. Myriad Medicines. Charlie, Nora's grandfather. He didn't need it spelled out. A medicine shop. An old, ailing man. The reasoning was terrifyingly obvious. A healer, Nathan whispered to the empty room. The patterns weren't just passing notes or thwarting bullies. They were deploying him like an emergency service. And the target was the heart of the Blackwood family. He had no choice. The demon in the wall had not spoken in a voice that allowed for choice, nor would he pass the chance to save a life. A soft knock came at his door. "Nate." It was Leo, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "You alive in there?" Nathan took a steadying breath. "Yeah, come in." Leo pushed the door open, leaning against the frame. "Look, sorry about the banter. You just seemed, I don't know, haunted." His eyes scanned Nathan's face. "You're planning something. I can see the gears turning. It's the same look you get before you ace a test you didn't study for." "I need to cut class tomorrow afternoon," Nathan said, his voice low. "All of them. I need a reason." Leo whistled softly. "Skipping is one thing. A full afternoon dash is a statement. Where's the fire?" "I can't tell you. Not yet. But it's important. More important than any lecture." Leo studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. I'll cover for you. Tell him you had a family emergency sprung on you, that the butler came to fetch you. Given your colorful home life, they'll buy it." He managed a weak grin. "But you owe me. Big time. And you will tell me what this is about when you can." "Deal," Nathan said, a surge of gratitude momentarily pushing back the dread. "Thanks, Leo." After Leo left, Nathan went to his desk. He took out the black bank card Dorothy had given him. "For your extras." He stared at it. Would this cover whatever is required? He had no idea what a private, emergency visit from an apothecary, because that's what Myriad Medicines sounded like, some old-world herbalist, would cost. The bell over the door of Myriad Medicines jingled with a sound like cracked glass. The shop was a cluttered cave of dried herbs in jars, strange bottled tinctures, and the dense, sweet and bitter smell of a forgotten forest. Behind a counter piled high with crumbling ledgers stood a man who looked like he'd been assembled from the shop's own shelves, wrinkled as dried bark, with eyes as sharp and bright as a raven's. This was Charlie. "You're not from the courier service, Charlie stated, his voice a dry rustle. No, sir. Nathan's mouth was dry. My name is Nathan Miller. I need you to come with me. Right now. Charlie didn't move. He picked up a mortar and pestle and began grinding something that smelled of licorice and regret. Do you now? And why would I do that? I have poultices to compound. It's for Mr. Blackwood, Nora Blackwood's grandfather. At their estate. He's unwell. The grinding stopped. One bushy gray eyebrow arched. Old man Blackwood. And he sends a nervous schoolboy from Hebron Academy to fetch me? Not his stern-faced lawyer or that anxious granddaughter. Forgive my skepticism. She doesn't know I'm here, Nathan admitted, the truth tumbling out. And he didn't send me. But you need to come. Please. It's urgent. Charlie set the mortar down with a soft clink. He leaned forward, his bright eyes scanning Nathan's face. Who told you to come to me, boy? A doctor? Which one? Nathan met his gaze. There was no safe lie, so he blurted out. That the faces in the walls told me. A profound silence filled the shop. Charlie didn't laugh. He didn't get angry. He went very, very still. After a long moment, he let out a slow breath. I see. He stroked his chin. And what, precisely, did these faces say? They said to bring you. That I had to pay whatever it cost, miss whatever I had to miss. That it wasn't a suggestion. Charlie studied him for another heartbeat, then gave a single, sharp nod. Right then, he turned and snatched a worn leather bag from a hook, its contents clinking. The faces in the walls, you say? Well, they've never steered me wrong before. Let's not keep them waiting. The cost, Nathan began, fumbling for the bank card. Charlie waved a gnarled hand as he flipped the shop sign to closed. We'll settle with the walls later, son. Some debts aren't paid with plastic. Now move. If they're involved, time is a thread we're holding by the singed end. Danger speaks in whispers, but here at the novella station, we let you hear them loud. Chapter 3. Nathan slid into the passenger seat of Charlie's car, a vehicle that seemed welded together from 4 different, equally unhappy automobiles. I just realized, Nathan said, buckling a questionable seatbelt. I don't actually know where the estate is. Charlie cranked the engine, which coughed to life with a sound of protesting metal. Good thing one of us does, he grunted, and pulled out into the street with a lurch. They drove in silence for 15 minutes before turning onto a long, private road lined with oaks. A massive iron gate loomed ahead. Charlie didn't slow down. As they approached, the gate began to swing open smoothly, as if expecting them. Nathan stared. How did the walls talk to you, boy? Charlie said, eyes on the winding drive. Maybe the gates listened to me. Now hush. The Blackwood estate was a gray stone monolith against the sky. Before Nathan could even raise a hand to the brass knocker, the front door was opened by a stern-looking man in a dark suit, the lawyer, or perhaps head of security. Mr. Blackwood is not receiving unscheduled. He'll see me, Charlie interrupted, holding up his leather bag. Tell him Charlie from the medicine shop is here about the pain in his chest that feels like a vice. The one he's been hiding. The man's eyes widened slightly. He stepped back, ushering them into a cavernous, cold foyer. Moments later, Dean Alistair Blackwood was wheeled into the room by a nurse. He was gaunt, a blanket over his legs, but his eyes were fierce. Charlie, the old man said, his voice thin but sharp. After all my calls, you finally deigned to visit? To what do I owe that? Charlie cut him off with a chopping motion of his hand. Alistair, we can waste 10 minutes on your pride, or I can waste 10 minutes saving your life. Your choice. But choose quickly. The clock's already ticking. Dean Blackwood's defiant expression faltered. He looked from Charlie's impatient face to the medical bag, then to Nathan, who stood awkwardly by the door. A tense silence hung in the air. Finally, the old man's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He gave a single, weary nod to the nurse. Take us to the sunroom, he said. Then, to Charlie, his voice barely a whisper. The vice is tightening, Charlie. Every day. I know, Charlie said, his tone finally softening as he moved to grip the handles of the wheelchair himself. That's why I'm here. Let's get to work. Charlie moved with a strange, deliberate grace. He poured a line of rock salt from a pouch, drawing a complex, interlocking circle on the sunroom's parquet floor. Lay down in the center, Alistair, Charlie instructed, his voice losing its rustle, gaining a resonant authority. The old man, too weak to argue, let the nurse help him onto the floor within the lines. Charlie smeared a gooey, pungent paste onto the man's chest, then placed smooth, flat salt rocks over each eye and one on his forehead. "What is this?" Dean Blackwood whispered, a tremor of fear in his voice. "Quiet," Charlie said. "The talking starts now." What followed wasn't medical. It was a bizarre procession, low, guttural chanting, a shuffling dance that seemed to trace the salt lines, and the sharp clack of small brass bells Charlie shook in each hand. To an outsider, it would have looked ridiculous, but Nathan saw it. A thin, black smoke began to seep from the old man's pores, coiling in the air like ink in water. It resisted, clinging to him, before dissipating with a final, silent shudder. For 45 minutes, Nathan watched. And as he watched, he saw them. Faces coalesced in the wood grain of the floorboards, in the floral upholstery of a chair, in the marble of the fireplace. Dozens of them, silent observers to the ritual. Their murmurs brushed against his mind, a chaotic chorus only he could fully hear. A wasteful expenditure of power, hissed a voice from a snarling face in the marble veining. "This old root should have been left to rot. His time is a dried-up stream." "Fool," countered a softer, maternal voice from the chair's damask rose pattern. "His heartbeat is the lock on the girl's cage. If it stops now, the contract is signed in his blood. She is shipped to that vulture's son by week's end." "Precisely," chimed a third, sly voice from a knot in the floorboard near Nathan's foot. "Keep the old clock ticking. It buys us seasons. The heiress must first see the cage clearly before she can be shown the lockpick." "And the lockpick," the voice trailed off into a knowing, silent chuckle. Another, younger-sounding whisper wove through from the shadow of a lampshade fringe. "The boy is the key, but he is also blind. He thinks he's saving a life. He doesn't see he's courting a queen." "Hush," snapped the maternal rose. "The threads are not to be spoken so plainly. He hears too much already." Nathan's blood ran cold. Courting a queen? He looked at Charlie, who paused mid-chant, his eyes darting to the knot in the floorboard, his brow furrowed. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, as if to clear a buzzing in his ears. He could sense them, Nathan realized, but like a distant radio signal full of static, not the clear, chilling dialogue flooding Nathan's own mind. Finally, Charlie stopped. The salt on Dean Blackwood's forehead had turned a dark gray. The old man took a deep, ragged breath, his first full one in months, by the look of shock on his face. "The weight," he gasped, pushing himself up on his elbows. "It's gone." He looked at Charlie with awe. "Name your price." "Anything." Charlie began packing his bells and pouches, his energy spent. "You owe me nothing, Alistair." "Then how can I repay this?" Charlie pointed a bony finger directly at Nathan, who stood frozen by the door. "You owe him. He's the one who wouldn't take no for an answer. He's the reason I'm here." Dean Blackwood's odd gaze shifted from the eccentric healer to the pale, wide-eyed boy from the academy. The dynamic in the room tilted irrevocably. Nathan said nothing. He just listened to the fading whispers of the faces, now smiling in the grain of the wood. "Let the old man marinate in his debt," purred the sly knot voice, fading away. "Aod life is a powerful tool for the future architect." Dean Blackwood stared, his mind struggling to catch up. The vice on his chest was gone, replaced by a whirlwind of questions. What just happened? Who is this boy? Why is he here? Why help me? His sharp eyes swept over Nathan, landing on the Hebron Academy crest on his blazer. "You're from the Academy," the old man said, his voice still thin. Are you a friend of Nora's?" Nathan swallowed. "Yes." The single word hung in the air. Dean Blackwood's eyes narrowed, searching for the angle, the leverage. In his world, help was never free. "Why?" he demanded, strength returning to his voice. "Why did you help me? What is it you want?" Nathan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. What did he want? He didn't even know. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Alistair." Charlie cut in, snapping his leather bag shut with finality. He sounded utterly weary. "Don't project your boardroom onto the boy. Not everyone plays your little power games. Some people are just good. They see a wrong and try to right it. A novel concept, I know." He turned and fixed the old man with a hard stare. "And before you start planning your repayment gala, understand this. Your ailment isn't gone. It's sleeping. And it wasn't an ailment. It was a poison. A slow, patient one." Charlie let out a dry, humorless snort. Rich people and their games. You'll be needing me again. And you'll be watching your teacups. Dean Blackwood's face went from grateful to ashen. The questions in his eyes were now entirely different and far more dangerous. Nathan stood silently, realizing the quiet faces in the walls hadn't just led him to save a life. They'd led him straight into the heart of a war. Dean Blackwood didn't press further. The motives could wait. The weight was gone, and that was a currency he understood. "Your name, young man?" he asked, his voice regaining some of its gravelly authority. "Nathan, sir. Nathan Miller." "Miller," Dean repeated. The name registered, but only as geography. A local family from Hilton Town, no more significant to him than his butlers. "Well, Nathan Miller, you have my thanks. If you ever need anything, you have only to ask. I am in your debt." He gestured toward a dark-paneled hallway. "Let's discuss this in the study. I'll have tea brought." "No," Charlie interrupted, already shepherding Nathan toward the grand front door. "Our business here is done. The boy needs to be getting back." "But the particulars, the poison you mentioned," Dean began, frustration creeping in, "are for you to puzzle out," Charlie called over his shoulder, not slowing down. "We're leaving." The heavy oak door shut behind them, cutting off the opulent, poisoned air of the estate. Nathan followed Charlie back to the beat-up car, the old man's final promise. "Anything you need," echoing in the quiet space between the engine's coughs and sputters as they drove away from the gated world of the Blackwoods. The car ride back was thick with silence. Nathan stared out the window at the blurring oaks, his mind a churning mess of sigils, black smoke, and whispering faces. He couldn't hold it in any longer. "Charlie," he said, his voice small in the rattling cabin. "The faces. What are they?" Charlie kept his eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. After a long moment, he gave a sharp, sideways glance. "You're asking the wrong man, boy. You're the one who sees them. You're the one they talk to. How would I know what they are? I just hear the static. But you know they're real. You listen to them." "I listen to a lot of things most people call noise," Charlie grunted. "Wind and wires. Roots groaning. Doesn't mean I understand the language." He fell silent for another mile before speaking again, his tone lower, graver. "But I'll give you this, and you listen good. Nothing in this world is free. Not a breath, not a crust of bread. And nothing from the other side of the world is free either. Their currency isn't money. It's favor. It's attention. It's consequence." He shot Nathan another look, his eyes like chips of flint. "You're taking their coins now, son. Just be damn sure you know the price before you spend them. They're values. They ain't human values. Tread carefully, or you won't like what you become when the bill comes due." The next day, a new Nora walked into the cafeteria. The permanent, delicate worry etched between her brows was gone, replaced by a brightness that seemed to light her from within. A few minutes earlier, the stoic family butler had found her by the east window. "Miss Blackwood," he'd said softly, "your grandfather had a remarkable recovery yesterday evening. He is resting comfortably. He wished for you to know the details, and to extend his personal instruction that you be courteous to your benefactor, the Miller boy." When she learned the truth, her gratitude solidified into quiet awe. Nathan's help wasn't a calculation. It was a pure, silent intervention. The note he'd passed her was no longer a mystery, but the precise reason she'd found the strength to hesitate. And his continued, wordless presence felt less like support and more like a shelter. The first truly solid thing in her gilded, shaky world. Now, Nora scanned the noisy hall, her gaze landing on Nathan. He was sitting with his usual companions, Leo and Isabella, the three of them shoveling food while engaged in what looked like a heated, grinning debate. She hesitated at the edge of their table, clutching her tray, words failing her. Leo spotted her first. "Well, if it isn't Her Majesty, looking unusually unstormy," he said, waving a fork. "You gonna stand there all day, or are you joining this intellectual symposium on whether cafeteria peas constitute a war crime?" Nora blinked, thrown off guard. That's not why I—" "Sit, sit," Leo insisted, kicking out a chair. "Nate here was just defending the peas' honor. It's a losing battle, but he's stubborn." Nathan looked up, meeting her eyes. A silent understanding passed between them. "They have a certain resilience," he said, picking up the thread Leo offered. Isabella, who had been watching Nora with reserved curiosity, gave a small, approving nod. "Like overcooked little green ball bearings. It's a texture, Nora let out a breath she didn't know she was holding and slid into the chair. I suppose it builds character, she offered tentatively. Exactly, Leo declared, pointing his fork at her. See? She gets it. Welcome to the court of questionable nutrition, Nora. And just like that, the wall was breached. The conversation flowed around her, pulling her into its current. Isabella's reserve melted as they debated teachers, and Nora found herself laughing, the sound foreign and light in her own ears. Nathan watched it happen, saying little. The faces had saved a life, and in doing so, had quietly pulled a lonely heiress into his orbit. They found themselves alone for a moment after class, in a quiet corner of the library. Nora, Nathan said, before she could speak. Don't let it become a thing. She turned, her expression unreadable. A thing? This. The help. I just heard some chatter. That your grandfather was sick. That you tried to get Charlie to visit, and he'd said no. He shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. I just went and asked again. Louder. It worked. So you don't need to feel indebted, or whatever. Nora studied him, her head tilted. You heard chatter, she repeated slowly. Yeah. And you just decided to march into a strange man's shop and demand he come with you. Basically. A small, knowing smile touched her lips. It wasn't the bright, relieved smile from the cafeteria. This one was sharper. Nathan Miller, you are a terrible liar. He froze. But, she continued, her voice softening, you're a good friend. And I won't call it a debt if you don't want me to. I'll just call it a fact. You helped when no one else did. Now, are we done being awkward about it? He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Yeah, we're done. Good. She shouldered her bag. Then walk me to the dorm. And try to keep up. I have questions about this chatter of yours. The thrill doesn't end here. It continues at Novella Station. So keep listening. Chapter 4. Milton slammed his trunk down in the dormitory hallway, the sound echoing like a gunshot. A month of suspension. A month of his grandmother's icy, silent fury that made his father's belt feel like a lover's caress. A month of scrubbing, pruning, and humiliation. The fire in his gut wasn't just anger anymore. It was a forge, burning white-hot, hammering his hatred into something pure and sharp. He rounded the corner, heading for the common room, when he saw them. Nathan and Nora Blackwood. They were walking together, not touching, but close. Nora was saying something, and Nathan actually smiled. A real one. Not the cowering flinch Milton was used to. Milton stopped dead. The world seemed to shrink to a tunnel, with those two at the end of it. No, it wasn't just the humiliation. It wasn't just the beatings. It was this. The useless little mouse, the boy who flinched at shadows, had somehow not only dodged his vengeance, but was now what? Socializing with a Blackwood? While Milton had been scraping grout with a toothbrush. A low, animal sound escaped his throat. His hands clenched into fists, the knuckles white, the memory of fresh welts screaming in protest. You, he breathed, the word barely audible, a promise of ash and ruin. The fire in his chest had just found its true fuel. Milton watched Nathan for 2 weeks like a hawk circling a field mouse, waiting for the cover to part. He got his chance on the field trip to the agricultural plots. With the teachers distracted, he cornered Nathan between a thick hedgerow and a stone wall. No running this time, cousin, Milton sneered, cracking his knuckles. Nathan's eyes darted past him, searching the stone wall, the dirt, the leaves. He saw them. The familiar faces, the old knight, the sly fox, watching from the patterns. But they were silent. Still. Help me, he whispered. One voice answered, calm and terrible. Endure this one time. To end it permanently. Milton's first punch drove the air from Nathan's lungs. The second split his lip. Nathan didn't cry out. He didn't grunt. He just took it, his silence a void that swallowed the violence. His passivity was a new kind of provocation. Scream, you little freak. Milton snarled, his rage boiling over. He forgot the rules. No blood, no visible injury, and brought his boot down hard on Nathan's shin. The sound of the snap was sickening. Nathan's vision whited out with pain, but he bit through his tongue to keep silent. It was Leo and Isabella who found him, battered and broken in the dirt. They half-carried him to the infirmary. Nora arrived minutes later, breathless from running. She stopped in the doorway. Nathan's face was a mess of bruises, his leg in a rough splint. Her own face went utterly, terrifyingly blank. Who did this? Leo, furious and scared, didn't think. Who else? That bully Milton. His cousin. Isabella hissed. Leo, don't. But the words were out. Nora's icy composure didn't crack. She just nodded once, her eyes like chips of winter glass. I see. She turned and walked out without another word. Seeing Nathan broken in that cot, his leg a grotesque angle, his face a map of Milton's rage, Nora felt a coldness so absolute it burned. It wasn't fury. It was a vacuum where her conscience had been. In that pristine, sterile silence, a single, clear thought echoed. I would burn this whole academy to the ground with him in it, and I would watch it turn to ash without a single blink. Milton, washing the blood from his knuckles in the dormitory sink, felt a surge of triumph. Nathan wouldn't snitch. He'd gotten away with it. He didn't know he hadn't just broken a leg. He'd just signed, in his own cousin's blood, the receipt for his own impending doom. And the collector was a Blackwood. Nathan spent a week in the infirmary. His teachers came, their voices soft with concern. Nathan, who did this to you? You can tell us. He just shook his head, staring at the ceiling. It wasn't fear. What more could Milton do? It was the code. You either got your own revenge, or you shut up. Hebron wasn't home. There was no Uncle George to interfere. Here, Nathan could make Milton's life hell in his own way. But first, he had to get out. On the last day, Isabella sat peeling an orange by his bed. He hadn't seen Leo. Or Nora. Nora he could almost understand, but Leo's absence was a cold stone in his gut. Izzy, he said, not for the first time. Where's Leo? And Nora? Don't worry about them, she said, not looking up, her voice clipped. What's happening out there? Tell me. Isabella sighed, setting down the orange. She knew he'd find out soon enough. After we found you. Nora lost it. I tried to calm her down. Leo tried to talk sense into her. But she just looked at us and said, how could you two watch him get beaten and do nothing? I thought you were his friends. Nathan went still. Leo tried to explain. Isabella continued quietly. Said we're from normal families, not like you Millers. That we've tried before, and we got targeted too. That you begged us to stay out of it. Her eyes grew damp. I didn't say anything. But she's right. Last year, it wasn't me. It was my siblings. I had to back away. What did Nora do? Nathan asked, his voice low. She said not to worry. That she wouldn't do anything crazy. Isabella met his gaze. For the past week, Milton's been beaten black and blue by upperclassmen. Over trivial things. Missing a curfew. A misplaced insult. Those upperclassmen, they're on Nora's payroll. Nathan stared at her, the pieces clicking into place. The revenge he'd planned was already in motion. But it wasn't his. It was colder, more efficient, and funded by a Blackwood. Wait, Nathan said, the laughter dying in his throat. What's Leo got to do with any of this? Isabella's lips twitched. Oh, he's just on point for logistics. Nora assigned him to the managing roster. Roster? Nathan echoed, confused. Yeah, a roster. To manage who gets a turn going after Milton each day. Keeps it from looking too personal. A genuine smile touched her voice. Leo's in charge of the schedule. He's taking it very seriously. A fresh wave of laughter, rich and booming, erupted from Nathan, shattering the infirmary's sterile gloom. It felt good. Isabella snorted. It's quite a little girlfriend you managed to snag. Nathan's laughter cut off into a sputter. She's not. Well, she's only he stammered, his ears turning a telling shade of pink. Isabella just raised an eyebrow, her smile widening as she went back to peeling the orange, leaving him floundering in the quiet. Nathan returned to his dormitory after a week. Everything was the same, yet completely different. His desk sat in the corner, the same almirah stood against the wall. But everything was spotless, organized with a precision that screamed not Leo. The air on his side of the room held a fresh, clean citrus scent he'd come to crave. On his bed lay a new set of school clothes, perfectly folded. His side table held a new water pitcher, not his old bottle, and a bowl of fresh fruit. But the most glaring change was the small, silent mini-fridge humming quietly in the corner. Leo ambled in, his usual swagger amplified. He offered a hand in a ridiculously formal gesture. Welcome back, my esteemed colleague, he announced in a pompous tone. Nathan shook his head, a smile tugging at his lips. What's all this, Leo? Merely the basics befitting your station, Leo said, his eyes twinkling. He pressed a sleek smartphone into Nathan's hand. Now, if you'd be so kind, navigate to the gallery. A little welcoming present awaits your viewing. He gave an exaggerated wink. Puzzled, Nathan unlocked the phone and opened the photos. The first image was a close-up of Milton's face, one eye swollen shut, a split lip grinning grotesquely at the camera. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. Nathan scrolled. Another. And another. A visual diary of Milton's very bad week. He looked up at Leo, who was beaming with pride. "Consider it a restorative justice slideshow," Leo said. "Courtesy of the new management." "Here," Leo said, moving to his side of the room. He dug into his bag and pulled out 3 distinct notebooks. Notes from the past week. Mine, which you probably won't read. Isabella's, which you definitely will. And Nora's. He placed it carefully on top of the stack, a grin spreading across his face. "Which you will not only read, but study." Nathan ignored the jab and took the notebooks. "Also," Leo continued, flopping onto his own bunk, "since your leg's still in that cast, you're officially excused from class." Nora already filed the request with admin. "It's all sorted." Nathan looked around the clean, quiet room, the mini-fridge humming softly. The support, the ruthless efficiency of Milton's downfall, it all felt surreal. He settled onto his bunk, his back against the wall. Leo launched into a detailed, gleeful recounting of Milton's week of misfortune. He described ambushes in the locker room, accidental shoves downstairs, and confiscated meals. But when he got to the part about Nora's quiet, icy fury, his tone shifted, and he shuddered involuntarily. "Anyway," Leo finished, pulling his blanket up, "it's a good thing we have her on our side. Otherwise, that bastard would have just gotten away with it again. Like he always does." The room fell silent, filled only with the hum of the fridge. Leo watched the whole spectacle from his bunk, his jaw hanging slightly open. Nathan just sat there, a strange, warm pressure building in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite name, foreign and unsettling in its comfort. Isabella had followed Nora in, but she lingered by the doorframe, a knowing smile playing on her lips as she observed the scene. "Is there a problem, Leo?" Nora asked, not looking at him, her gaze still on Nathan. Leo snapped his mouth shut. "Nope, no problem. Just admiring the service." "Good," Nora said. Then, to Nathan, her voice softening just a fraction, "The soup is still hot. Start with that." Nathan lay on his bunk after the meal. Leo had scurried off, likely under some silent command from Nora. Nathan had seen the glance, the subtle nod. The plaster beside his bed shivered. Not a crack, but a shift. Shadows deepened, coalescing into the same grotesque, horned face from before. "You did well." The demon's calm, soothing voice resonated in his mind. "Though you shouldn't have divulged us to that half-cooked quack." The face didn't fade. It waited, as if expecting questions. "What do you want from me?" Nathan whispered into the quiet room. "Nothing. We merely give counsel. You possess free will. We do not compel. What do you want in return, then?" The face seemed to ponder. "In return," it mused. "Little Seer, payment is only a question where a pact exists. There is no pact between us. It has been an age since one could truly see and hear. We only wish to participate in this side of the world once more, to feel its currents. So rest assured, we want nothing from you. Pay no mind to one who knows only half-truths. But heed this, form no pacts. Ask for nothing. Let fate run its course. We merely nudge the flow for a better outcome." The face began to soften, bleeding back into the wall. A better outcome for who? Nathan pressed. But the wall was just a wall again, leaving only the echo of its final, cryptic words hanging in the citrus-scented air. The next 6 months were the quietest and most enjoyable of Nathan's life. Nora's inclusion in their group was a seamless, welcome change. At Nathan's request, she called off her upperclassmen. "It's not fear," he told her. "A cornered dog gets reckless." So Nathan did what he did best. He quietly targeted Milton's reputation. Until now, Milton thought the scathing remarks on his report cards were just generic disapproval. But Nathan, through careful whispers and planted doubts, made sure every teacher saw malice in Milton's every move. Even good marks were now viewed with suspicion. The voices from the faces continued, their advice always short, always specific. "Buy the ruined landscape at the flea market. Gift it to Headmaster Sterling." Nathan did. It turned out to be a painting by the headmaster's own reclusive great-grandfather. Go to the old creek. The tree with silver-pointed leaves. Send the black fruit to Charlie. Charlie received the rare, thought-extinct night bloom fruit. When Nathan next saw him, the old man's eyes were still red-rimmed. For that, Charlie said, his voice thick. You asked for anything. So Nathan did. Keep visiting Dean Blackwood. Make sure the poison is gone. Charlie agreed without a second's hesitation, and his relationship with Nora bloomed. Neither acknowledged it aloud, but their time together intensified, guided by the silent counsel's gentle nudges. Pluck the white winter blooms. For Nora, your notes on quantum theory are clearer. Share them. She'd blush at the flowers or grin like a kid when his notes unlocked a difficult concept. Soon, they shared every meal, went shopping together, and Nathan would wordlessly take her hand on their walks to warm it against the cold. One afternoon in the common room, Leo watched Nathan return Nora's borrowed scarf with a careful fold. Just announce you're dating and put us all out of our suspense, would you? Leo groaned. Isabella nodded, smirking. Really? The tension is giving me second-hand anxiety. Nathan and Nora shared a quick, private glance, a silent conversation filled with unspoken understanding. Before looking away, small smiles playing on both their lips. Finals were over. Nathan's report card lay on the common room table like a pronouncement. Leo snatched it up first. Let's see the damage. Well, straight A's. Again. Physics, calculus, literature, boring. His finger slid down the page and stopped. A chink in the armor. A B in physical education. Nathan shrugged, taking the card back. I spent my time building a mind, not biceps. Doesn't mean I'm frail. Could have fooled Milton, Isabella remarked dryly from the sofa, not looking up from her book. He wasn't defeated by muscles, Nora said, entering the room and smoothly taking the report card from Nathan's hand. She examined it, a small, proud smile touching her lips. He was defeated by strategy, and a well-placed note. She handed it back, her gaze meeting his. The B is a badge of honor. It proves you have better things to do. Leo groaned. You're both insufferable. A B is a tragedy. My parents would kill for a B. Your parents, Isabella said, turning a page, are still trying to understand how you got a C in study hall. The room filled with their easy laughter, the single B on the glossy paper not a flaw, but a testament to a different kind of strength. The Bentley waited at the curb, sleek and out of place. Leo stood beside Nathan with his duffel bag. Well, Leo said, eyeing the car. Guess I'll wait for the usual jalopy. Nathan hesitated. You could? I mean, Sebastian, standing by the open door, gave a slight, knowing nod. There is more than enough room for Mr. Vernon, Master Nathaniel. It would be my pleasure. Leo's eyes widened. Seriously? Get in, Nathan said, smiling. They loaded their bags. Milton was nowhere to be seen, held back for supplementary classes. Isabella had already left the day before. Nora stood apart, under the old oak tree, her own car, a silent Rolls-Royce Phantom, waiting a few feet away. I'm not good with goodbyes, she'd said earlier. Yet, there she was. Before getting in, Nathan's eyes found her. A familiar, gentle voice brushed his mind. Hug her. He walked over. Without a word, he pulled her into an embrace. The world narrowed to the feel of her coat, the scent of her perfume. For a moment, there was only silence. Then he felt it. A single, almost soundless shudder, a sob held tightly in a heart too reluctant to part. She didn't pull away. She just held on, her face buried in his shoulder for one precious second longer. I'll call, he whispered. She nodded against him, then finally stepped back, her eyes bright but dry. You'd better. He turned and got into the Bentley. As the car pulled away, he looked back. She was still under the tree, watching until he was out of sight. One twist leads to another. Novella Station is the maze you'll want to enter. We are waiting for you to help us navigate this maze. Chapter 5. Nathan stepped through the front door, and the air itself felt different. Lighter, brighter. He found his mother, Brenda, in the parlor. She wasn't wringing her hands. She was reading a magazine. She looked up and smiled, a real, calm smile. Welcome home, Nathan. From the study, he heard his father's voice, clear and sober, discussing business on the phone. No slur, no rage. He climbed the stairs to his room and pushed the door open. Gone was the faded floral wallpaper. In its place was a deep, immersive forest scene. His old, battered furniture had been replaced. A sleek, modern desk with built-in warm lighting held a new laptop. His books were neatly ordered on wall-mounted shelves. He walked to the wall, searching, and there they were, the kind Old Man and the Fox, woven perfectly into the bark of a painted oak tree. Hidden, but present. The fox, he could swear, was now grinning. A soft voice, familiar and sly, whispered from the new wallpaper. "Welcome back, little Seer. We've redecorated. Do you approve?" Nathan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "It's an upgrade. Some environments," the voice murmured, "just need a change of scenery to reveal their true potential." A soft knock came at his door just before 7. Sebastian stood in the hall. "Master Nathaniel, Madam has requested your presence at the dinner table this evening." Nathan stared. "The dinner table?" "Indeed, sir. The family is assembling." He followed Sebastian downstairs. The formal dining room, usually dark and closed, was lit and set. His father, Vincent, sat straight-backed in his usual chair, a glass of water beside him. His mother, Brenda, gave him another small, steady smile from her seat. Milton was conspicuously absent. At the head of the table, Dorothy Miller presided, her posture as rigid as ever. Nathan took his seat in silence. The first course was served without the usual tense clatter of cutlery. It was Dorothy who broke the quiet. She set her soup spoon down with a precise click. "Your final report card, Nathaniel," she began, her voice not sharp, but conversational. Sebastian mentioned the straight A's and the single B. Nathan froze, a spoonful of soup halfway to his mouth. She was talking, at dinner, about his grades. "Yes, grandmother. Physical education," she stated. "A strategic neglect, I assume? Allocating resources to more critical fronts." Nathan met her gaze, seeing not disapproval, but a cool, analytical curiosity. "Something like that." "A sound decision," she said, picking up her spoon again. "Muscles can be hired. Minds must be built. Tell me, did you find Professor Lawrence's economic history lectures as reductive as I did in my day?" The table fell silent, everyone watching this unprecedented event. Nathan swallowed, the taste of the soup suddenly secondary to the novel flavor of a normal family dinner. "I found them focused more on theory than practical application," he ventured. Dorothy gave a single, approving nod. "Precisely. A flaw that has persisted." She took a sip of water. "We shall discuss this further." And just like that, a conversation, a real one, began to unfold over the Miller dinner table. Dorothy watched Nathan over the rim of her water glass. It wasn't just the bookish intelligence. It was his reasoning, sharp, logical, devoid of emotional fluster. And that dry, understated wit, it was Arthur's. A ghost of her husband lived in this boy she'd spent years ignoring. A corrosive regret, cold and heavy, settled in her chest. She had punished the grandson for the father's failures. If Arthur were alive, he'd have never forgiven such narrow-minded folly. As the final course was cleared, she dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Nathaniel, join me for tea in the study tomorrow afternoon. 3 o'clock. It wasn't a request, but the edge was gone. "Yes, grandmother." With a nod, the dinner was concluded. Brenda's eyes shone with unshed tears of pure, disbelieving joy as she rose from the table. Vincent simply sat, staring at the space where his son had been, his face a mask of dumbfounded confusion. His son, the one he'd written off as weak. The boy who had just held his own in a conversation with Dorothy Miller. The foundations of Vincent's own bitter self-loathing quietly began to crack. At the other end of the table, George and Loisel ate in frozen silence, like two marble statues pretending to be alive, mechanically moving their cutlery, utterly excluded from the seismic shift happening around them. A soft knock came at his door just as he was about to slip into bed. Brenda entered, holding a cup of warm milk. She moved differently, not with the old, hesitant shuffle, but with a quiet purpose. "I thought you might like this," she said, her voice steadier than he'd ever heard it. She placed the cup on his nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed, her back straight. "Now, tell me properly. How was school? Your friends, Leo, Isabella, and that Nora girl you mentioned in your letters? I want to know everything." Nathan took the milk, studying her. The perpetual shadow of fear was gone from her eyes. "It was good, Mom. Really good. But what happened here? It's like walking into a different house. Brenda's calm expression softened with a touch of old pain. She folded her hands in her lap, a new habit that looked deliberate. It started the day after you left. Your grandmother summoned me to her study. I went in, trembling as always, expecting to be dismissed. But she just looked at me. For a long time. She took a slow breath, as if reciting a hard-learned lesson. She said, "Brenda, your tears are a weapon you've turned on yourself and your son. Every sob is a nail in his coffin of shame. You are not a victim in this house. You are a mother. Start behaving like one." It was brutal, but it was the first true thing anyone had said to me in 18 years. "What did you say?" Nathan whispered. "I just cried harder," Brenda admitted with a wry, regretful smile. But she didn't send me away. She made me sit there. Every day after that, at 10 a.m., I was in her study. She called it remedial lessons in living. She'd make me review household accounts, not to do math, but to understand the value of things, of stability. She'd have me plan menus, not as a chore, but as an act of providing care. "A wife is not decoration," she'd say. "She is the foundation. And a mother is not a sentiment. She is a fortress. You have built neither. You have only been a ghost, haunting your own life." Brenda's voice grew thick, but no tears fell. She made me see that by hiding in my room, by letting myself be broken, I had abandoned my post. I had left you undefended and given Vincent nothing to hold on to but his own failures. My crying wasn't grief, it was surrender, and it was the most selfish thing I've ever done. Nathan reached out and took her hand. It was warm, and it didn't tremble. "And the past?" he asked gently. Her fingers tightened around his. "The past." She looked away, out the window into the dark. "I was young. There was a boy, before your father. It was intense, poetic. When it ended, I thought my world had ended with it. I married Vincent while my heart was still in ribbons, seeing him as a consolation, not a choice. I carried that old ghost with me, and when a final letter from that old life arrived, I wept over it. Vincent saw. It confirmed every fear he had of being second best, unlovable. It was the spark that lit his spiral." She turned back, her gaze clear and full of a hard-won resolve. "I chased a phantom and neglected the real man beside me. I let a memory poison a lifetime. Your grandmother helped me see that. She helped me bury that ghost, Nathan. Truly bury it. Not with more tears, but with action, with being present." She leaned forward, her other hand coming up to cup his face, a gesture both fierce and tender. "I failed you for so long. I am so sorry. But I am here now. I am your mother. And I am not leaving my post again." The woman before him was not the sobbing mess of his childhood. She was someone new, forged in the fire of Dorothy's harsh, necessary lessons. And for the first time, Nathan felt not like her protector, but simply like her son. Brenda fell silent, the confession hanging in the air between them. Nathan absorbed it all, the ghost of an old love, the poison of neglect. But one piece was still missing. "And Dad?" Nathan asked, his voice low. "How did this happen?" He gestured vaguely, indicating the sober, present man downstairs. A complex mix of pain and hope crossed Brenda's face. "That was your grandmother's masterpiece. And her penance." She took another steadying breath. "After she started with me, she turned to Vincent. She didn't send him away to some facility. She had one built here, in the old gardener's cottage. She told him, 'You will either walk out of that door a miller, or you will never leave it.' It wasn't a choice. What did she do? She went in with him," Brenda said, wonder in her voice. "Every day? For hours. At first, I'd hear him shouting, raging, blaming her, blaming me, blaming the world. She just took it. Then, one day, the shouting stopped. Sebastian said he heard them talking. Just talking." Brenda's gaze grew distant, as if picturing the scene. She finally asked him the question no one else ever had. "Why, Vincent?" The drinking, the cruelty, it didn't start with Brenda's letter. It started when Arthur died. "Tell me why." Nathan leaned forward, captivated. And he told her. Brenda continued. "He was supposed to be the heir, the brilliant son. But when your grandfather died so suddenly, the weight of it, it crushed him. He felt like a fraud, a boy playing dress-up in a man's empire. He was terrified of failing her, of failing the Miller name. So he started pretending to be confident, to be in control. The drinking was just to quiet the fear. And when he saw me crying over that letter," she looked at Nathan, her eyes full of a shared sorrow. It wasn't jealousy over a lost love. It was proof. Proof that he was a failure in every way. As a businessman, as a son, and now, as a husband. He thought he could never be first in anyone's heart, not even mine. So he decided to be the worst instead. It was easier. And grandmother? Nathan prompted. She listened. Brenda said, a note of awe returning. And then she said, you are correct. You have been a failure. A spectacular one. But failure is not a permanent state unless you are a coward. Arthur's death was not your fault. Your reaction to it is entirely your own. You have hidden behind your father's ghost and your wife's tears for long enough. It is time to build something of your own. Brenda mimicked Dorothy's crisp, unyielding tone perfectly. She made him start from zero. Literally. He had to rebuild the cottage furniture with his own hands. She had him study the company books from the year he took over, line by line, and write reports on every mistake. Not to shame him, she said, but to make him see the mess, so he could learn to clean it up. And the drinking? The cottage was locked. No alcohol. She had a doctor manage the withdrawal. It was brutal, but she was there. Every single day. She didn't coddle him. She'd sit and work on her own ledgers while he sweat and shook. She'd say, the pain is the price of the life you squandered. Pay it, and we can discuss the future. Brenda reached for Nathan's hand again. She showed him, through sheer, relentless will, that he was not beyond saving. That the Miller in him wasn't defined by Arthur's shadow, but by what he chose to build himself. She became the father he lost, and the mother he'd pushed away, all in one. She gave a soft, incredulous laugh. The man downstairs, who spoke to you about economic theory, that's the man I fell in love with, Nathan. The one I thought was gone forever because of my stupid mistake. Your grandmother didn't just rehabilitate him. She excavated him. Nathan sat back, the warm milk forgotten. The transformation of the house wasn't magic. It was the result of a fierce, stubborn old woman waging a war on two fronts, deconstructing Brenda's weakness and Vincent's self-destruction, and winning. Not with kindness, but with ruthless, unwavering truth. The faces in the walls had guided him. But Dorothy Miller had rebuilt his family from the ground up. The silent council had its power, but this was the power of a human will, refusing to let its legacy die. Trust no one, except the thrill waiting at Novella Station. Chapter 6. Nathan tossed and turned for most of the night. His entire understanding of the world had been upended. He'd had a plan: survive, escape, leave this miserable wreck of a family behind. His crying mother, his drunken father, his cruel grandmother, they were burdens to be shed. But in 1 year, the burdens had transformed. The wreckage had been cleared, revealing a foundation he never knew existed. The warmth wasn't gone. It had been buried under a mountain of misunderstandings, crushed by the weight of duty and disappointment. And the architect of the excavation was the last person he'd ever have guessed. His thoughts raced, a frantic blur of past and present, until exhaustion finally pulled him under. For the first time in that house, he slept deeply, soundly. He was awakened not by a nightmare, but by soft, familiar sounds. A sly, snickering chuckle like a fox, and a gentle, chiding voice. Let the pup sleep. He has time yet before the day demands him. The fox-like snicker cut off with a soft, amused snort. Silence returned. But sleep was gone. Nathan blinked awake, groggy in the gray pre-dawn light. The kind voice spoke again, clear and direct from the forest scene wall. When you go to meet her this afternoon, bring sunflowers for your grandmother. Nathan lay still, staring at the painted fox, who seemed to be grinning knowingly among the leaves. A gift, not a weapon, not a strategy. A peace offering, suggested by the very forces that had guided him through war. The world had truly turned upside down. Breakfast was a solitary affair. Nathan was the last one down. Arthur, the senior footman, served him personally. Your appointment with Madam is at 3, Master Nathaniel. Arthur reminded him softly. She does appreciate punctuality. He gave a meaningful glance. The simple gray suit in your wardrobe would be most appropriate. By 12:30, Nathan had 2.5 hours. Following the voice's instruction, he went to the market and bought a bunch of bright sunflowers. He arrived at the study door 10 minutes early, the flowers feeling both absurd and necessary in his hands. He knocked. Enter. Dorothy sat behind her vast desk, a picture of familiar authority. Yet, The lines of her face seemed softer, and her eyes, when they lifted to meet his, held a discernible warmth. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair before her. Her gaze flicked to the sunflowers, and for a fraction of a second, something unreadable passed over her features. Nathan sat, placing the cheerful bouquet awkwardly on the edge of the polished desk. Dorothy looked from the flowers to his face. "An unusual choice," she remarked, her tone neutral. "Sunflowers are bold. They face the light relentlessly. They are not a subtle flower." "No, grandmother," he agreed, unsure if that was a criticism. She was silent for a long moment, simply studying him. "Arthur mentioned you visited the market. You went specifically for these." "Yes." "Why?" Nathan met her gaze. He couldn't explain the voice in the wall. So he told a different, simpler truth. "Because, as you said, these flowers chase the sunlight relentlessly. I hope this house will too." Dorothy's stern mouth softened almost imperceptibly. She reached out, not for the flowers, but to adjust the angle of the vase already on her desk, making space. "Put them here, then." He leaned forward and placed the sunflowers in the spot she'd cleared. The vibrant yellow against the dark mahogany was startling. "A hopeful sentiment," she said, her voice lower. She looked from the blooms back to him. "Chasing light requires turning one's back on the shadows. A difficult discipline." She straightened a ledger on her desk, a small, precise action. "Now, the tea is poured. Tell me about this B in physical education. Was it a matter of capacity or of priority?" The choice to focus on the single B was an interesting one. He welcomed it. "The world isn't one with a brawl, but with a brain," Nathan said. "Like everyone, I have 24 hours. I prioritize what I find useful. But do not neglect the vessel. Only a healthy body houses a sound mind," she replied, taking a sip of her tea. She set the cup down with a quiet click. "Arthur informs me you are close with the Blackwood girl." "She's one of my closest friends," Nathan said, the words feeling clumsy. "A close friend," Dorothy repeated, her voice dry. "Close enough that in the last year, we have received a series of unusually favorable, one-sided contracts from the Blackwood Empire. Close enough that you were a frequent visitor to their estate. Close enough that you attended a private, cleansing ritual for Patriarch Alistair Blackwood himself." She fired the points like precisely aimed rounds. "Would you care to amend your definition of close friend?" Nathan felt the temperature in the study drop several degrees. She knew. Not everything, but enough. The faces had taught him to listen, but Dorothy Miller had taught him the value of what was left unsaid. Denial would be an insult. "I wouldn't amend it," he said, meeting her flinty gaze. "But I would expand it. She's a close friend who needed help. I was in a position to provide it. The rituals and the contracts weren't a transaction. They were a consequence." Dorothy's eyebrows arched. "Consequences are rarely so profitable for our side, Nathaniel. Blackwoods do not give favors. They invest. What, precisely, did you provide that was worth such an investment?" He chose his words with care, walking the line between truth and the impossible. "I provided a solution to a problem their money couldn't solve. A problem that was killing her grandfather. And how does a Miller schoolboy solve a problem that stumps the Blackwood fortune? By listening," Nathan said, the core truth slipping out. "And by knowing where to find the right help." Dorothy leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. She studied him for a long, silent moment, the only sound the quiet tick of the mantel clock. "Listening," she echoed, as if tasting the word. "A rare and undervalued skill. One your grandfather possessed." She paused, her eyes drifting to the sunflowers, their faces turned toward the window's light. "This friendship, is it strategic?" "No," Nathan answered immediately, then reconsidered. "Not for me. For her. I think it started as gratitude. Now it's just Nora." "Nora, a fine name," his grandmother observed. "I've heard she is beautiful as well." "She is," Nathan said, then blurted out without thinking. "But it's her intensity and drive that are admirable." His ears flushed red with embarrassment. "Intense and driven," she repeated. "Traits that, once misaligned, lead to incorrigible disputes. A dispute with a Blackwood can have dire consequences. Pay attention to your feelings. Think twice. No, thrice, before taking each step." She spoke calmly, ignoring his juvenile display. "Yes, grandmother," he replied. She gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Gratitude from a Blackwood is a tangible asset. Do not be naive, but do not cheapen it by treating it as mere business. And do not think we need to benefit from them. Their business is welcome if it comes with due respect, not if they treat it as paying off a debt. Make it clear that a good deed, done with pure intention, does not require repayment. Her words carried an echo of Charlie's own wisdom. She took another sip of tea. You will invite Nora for dinner next Friday. Inform Sebastian of any dietary requirements. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an integration. Nathan understood. The Miller family was no longer just a dysfunctional house to escape. It was an entity being rebuilt, and his close friend from the Blackwood Empire was now part of its new calculus. I will, he said. Good. She picked up her pen, signaling the audience was nearing its end. And Nathaniel? Continue to listen. It seems to be a talent of yours, something I ignored for too long. If not for you making me realize that, apart from being the matriarch of this family, I was also a guardian. I would have kept ignoring the painful cries of this house, and of the people within it. By the end, her voice held a faint, uncharacteristic tremor. I regret not listening. I regret ignoring my charge. I regret wallowing in my own pity and pain. Thank you for reminding me. She drew a slow, steadying breath. From now on, listen to this house, and to the people in it. Their needs are changing, and so are mine. Nathan stood motionless by the door, the weight of her words settling in the quiet room. This wasn't a lesson or a strategy. It was a confession. The granite had cracked, and from the fissure, he saw not weakness, but a profound, weary strength. He didn't know what to say. I'm sorry felt wrong. Thank you felt insufficient. So he simply met her gaze and gave a slow, solemn nod, an acknowledgement, a promise. Her eyes held his for a moment longer, the warmth in them now tinged with a raw, honest fatigue. Then she looked down at her ledger, the pen in her hand poised once more over the figures. The matriarch had returned, but the guardian now stood beside her. Close the door on your way out, Nathaniel, she said, her voice firm again, but softer at the edges. Yes, grandmother. He stepped into the hall, pulling the heavy door shut behind him with a gentle click. The sound felt final, like the closing of one chapter and the uneasy, hopeful opening of another. The sunflowers on her desk were no longer just a gift from him. They were a symbol of her own resolve to face the light after years of presiding over the shadows. The grand dining room felt both familiar and utterly alien. The same long mahogany table, the same crystal, but the air was clear, not choked with dread. Nathan stood stiffly near his chair, watching the doorway. Nathan held his new phone to his ear, pacing his room. Nora? It's Nathan. I know who it is, her voice came amused. Your name appears on the screen. Is everything all right? Yes. No. I mean yes. He took a breath. My grandmother has requested, that is, she'd like you to come to dinner. At the Miller estate. Next Friday. A relieved laugh escaped him. That's probably the perfect description. 7 o'clock. Sebastian will meet you at the door. Sebastian the butler who drives the Bentley? The very one. All right. Don't freak out. I've done this a million times. You just have to not spill soup on yourself. As the call ended, a voice, dry as stone, whispered from the crown molding. The arena is set, little Seer. Let the heiress be your shield. Her polish will distract from your nerves. At 7, Sebastian announced her. Nora walked in, a vision in emerald silk that made Nathan's breath catch. A tiny, reassuring smirk was for him alone before she addressed his grandmother. Mrs. Miller, thanks for having me. Your house is seriously cool, Nora said respectfully before taking her seat at the table. It has endured. As have we. Nathaniel considers you a close friend. Dorothy's reply was short, but filled with warmth. He's the best. He helped my granddad when no one else could. Her gaze held Dorothy's, a subtle challenge in her polite tone. Guess he's good at fixing things people think are broken. A new voice, sly and fox-like, murmured from the chandelier's shadow. She fights for your standing. Good. The matriarch respects a counterplay. The conversation turned to school, then town gossip. Nora was sharp and funny, even making Brenda smile. Under the table, her hand found Nathan's and squeezed. See, not a disaster. He squeezed back, relief washing over him. The kind man's voice sighed from the wallpapers for a scene. A bridge is built, not with grand gestures, but with shared bread. The foundation is laid. Now let it settle. Behind every locked door is a tale. Novella Station holds the keys. Keep listening. There is more to this tale. Chapter 7. The last few days felt surreal. Brenda was in the kitchen, actually humming. Nathan, do you prefer the roast with rosemary or thyme? She asked, consulting a cookbook like a general with a battle plan. Thyme's fine, Mom. In the study, Vincent's voice, clear and sober, carried into the hall as he discussed timber futures on the phone. The Scandinavian quote is better, but the logistics cost kills the margin. We stick with the Canadian supplier. From the parlor, George's voice was a tense, low grumble. A subsidiary? She's put me in charge of a subsidiary? It's a glorified desk. Loisel's reply was a hissed whisper. It's a check, George. A very large, very reliable check. And my new building is on Main Street. I have a sitting with the Society columnist tomorrow. We've been given our lanes. Stay in yours. Later, over tea, Dorothy addressed Nathan and Vincent with finality. George will manage Miller Logistics. Its sole client is Miller Corporation. He cannot fail unless we do. Loisel has her distractions. The core remains here. Vincent gave a firm nod. Understood, Mother. One last day is holiday. In the evening, Nathan was reading in his room when the kind old man's voice spoke, clear and urgent, from the forest scene wall. Get ready, young seer. A storm gathers on the horizon. Nathan's book slipped from his hands. A storm? What kind of storm? The kind that reshapes landscapes. We will guide you, but you must navigate it. You will need every ally you have made. Start investing in those connections now. It is poor strategy to only seek a bridge when the river is already flooding. What does that mean? What do I do? It means look beyond your dormitory. The heiress. The healer. The principal whose family history you returned to him. The shopkeeper whose daughter you helped find a lost locket. The farmer you directed to the hidden spring. These are not accidents. They are a network we helped you build. Tend to it. A friend visited once is not a friend relied upon. Be present. Be useful. Build your web before the wind tears through it. The voice began to fade, softening back into the whisper of leaves. Wait. When? How much time do I have? But the wall was silent, leaving only the ominous warning and a single, clear command echoing in the sunlit room. Build your web. The command build your web hummed in Nathan's veins. He started small, methodical, guided by the face's gentle nudges. He did what he could, creating chance encounter where an indirect approach was required, and reaching out where direct approach wasn't considered intrusion. For Principal Sterling, it wasn't another grand gesture. Nathan stayed after a meeting to ask a detailed question about the school's founding architecture, a known passion of the headmasters. Sir, about the East Wing archways, are they original to the 1890s build, or a later addition? Principal Sterling looked up, surprised, then pleased. An astute question, Miller. Later, I'm afraid. The original sketches show a simpler design. I have them in my office, if you'd care to see. For Charlie, it was a letter, not asking for anything, but including a pressed sample of a rare lichen Nathan had noticed on a walk, knowing the old man would find it fascinating. He bumped into the shopkeeper, Mr. Heiress, at the post office. Mr. Heiress, how's your daughter? Did she ever get that locket clasp fixed? Shopkeeper's face breaking into a warm smile. Nathan, my boy. She did, thanks to you. She wears it every day. How's school? For the farmer, old man Clay, it was direct help. Nathan showed up at his fence on a Saturday morning. Mr. Clay, need an extra pair of hands with that stone wall? I've got time. Old man Clay squinted at him. You're that Miller boy, the one with the good directions. He nodded toward a pile of rocks. Well, don't just stand there. Grab a glove. With Nora, it was simpler. He called, not about a crisis, but about nothing. Hey, heard there's a new exhibit at the Natural History Museum. Looks like the kind of boring thing we both pretend to hate, but actually love. Want to go Saturday? Nora, after a beat of surprised silence. Are you asking me out on a normal date, Nathan Miller? Well, trying to, Nathan said. Nora replied with a soft laugh. Okay, but I'm choosing the lunch spot after. He didn't force it. He just showed up, remembered details, offered help, and asked questions. Each interaction was a silken thread, carefully placed. The faces in the walls watched, murmuring quiet approval. The web was invisible, but with each connection, Nathan felt it grow stronger. a safety net being woven in the calm before an unseen storm. The storm arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, not with thunder, but in the form of a polished silver sports car purring to a halt outside Hebron Academy. Its driver unfolded himself from the low seat, Blake Warren. Tall, with the easy grace of old money and a smile that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. He was a scion of the Warren dynasty, a name that made even Blackwoods measure their words. He found Nora by the oak tree. Nathan and Leo were a few paces away, but they heard every word. "Nora, you've been playing house long enough," Blake said, his voice a smooth, patronizing baritone. He didn't even glance at the others. "Your parents are done humoring your independent study. The agreement stands. I'm here to finalize the timeline. You'll return with me this weekend. The Henderson merger depends on our united front." Nora's face was pale, but set. "I'm 18, Blake. There is no agreement I signed. You can tell my parents their merger is their problem. Legally an adult, yet still acting like a child." He sighed, as if disappointed. "These little rebellions are beneath you. This place," he said, with a faint wave at the school grounds, "was a phase. It's over. Get in the car. We'll discuss the details privately." Nathan stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Nora and Blake. Leo moved to flank his other side. Blake's gaze finally landed on Nathan, a slow, dismissive appraisal. "And you are someone she chooses to be with," Nathan said, his voice low. Blake chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Choice. How quaint. This isn't a dormitory romance, boy. This is a dynastic alignment. Now, if you'll excuse us." His eyes cut back to Nora, all false patience gone. "Nora." Now, the air turned to ice. The storm had arrived. It wasn't about schoolyard bullying. It was about ownership, and it demanded Nora back. Nathan felt the familiar, cool whisper in his mind, cutting through the red haze of anger. Invite him to talk, like civilized beings. Over coffee. The suggestion was so absurd it broke the tension. Nathan cleared his throat. Nora, her face pale with fury, was about to unleash a torrent of words. Nathan reached out and gently but firmly squeezed her hand, a silent plea. "Stand down. Trust me. This is getting us nowhere," Nathan said, his voice surprisingly steady. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Let's go talk. Like adults." Blake looked stunned, then amused. Nora stared at Nathan as if he'd gone mad, but she felt the pressure of his hand and bit back her retort. The alternative was a spectacle. Blake shrugged, a king indulging peasants. "Fine." A brief chat. At the quiet, upscale shop, the voice whispered again, this time from the intricate tile mosaic on the floor. "The Warren scion has a sweet tooth. He always orders the vanilla latte. Buy one for him. And a packet of the honeyberry biscuits." Nathan approached the counter, confused. How would coffee and cookies make any of this right? He ordered the vanilla latte and asked for the biscuits. "Ah, the honeyberry," the cafe owner said, brightening. "Limited edition. The berries are wild, nearly impossible to cultivate. This might be the last batch I get for a year. Let me know what your friend thinks. It's a unique taste." He placed the small, elegant packet on the counter. Nathan brought the order to the table. "A peace offering," he said, placing the steaming vanilla latte and the rare biscuits in front of Blake. Blake eyed it, then smirked, accepting the implicit surrender. He took a long sip of the sweet coffee and unwrapped the biscuits, eating too with deliberate slowness. Over coffee, Blake laid out his terms with calm, chilling precision. "You're not a bad kid, Miller, but you're in the deep end now. Making an enemy of the Warrens is a lifetime of unnecessary friction. Step aside gracefully, and I'll see to it the Miller family only prospers from this." He finished the last of the honeyberry biscuits, washing them down with the vanilla latte, and made his final point to Nora. "Just think about what's best for the Blackwood legacy. Choose someone worthy of it." His point made, he left, the picture of condescending victory, the unique, rare taste of honeyberry still on his tongue. Nathan watched him go, baffled and frustrated, having no idea he had just served the man a poison crafted specifically for him. The moment Blake's car disappeared from view, Nora's composure shattered. She whirled on Nathan, her eyes blazing. "What was that?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "A peace offering? Are you that afraid? Is surrender just what you're used to? First with Milton, then with your family, and now this vulture?" Her words were scalding, each one a lash. You just sat there and let him talk down to us. You bought him cookies. Nathan felt each word like a physical squeeze on his heart. The worst part was the kernel of truth in them. He had been passive for so long. Creating a scene on school grounds would only hurt you, he said, his own voice tight. It would be gossip fodder for weeks, damaging your reputation, not his. Being calm doesn't mean I've given up. He met her furious gaze, pleading. Nora, just trust me. Please. He sounded powerless, even to himself. He felt powerless. He had no grand plan, only a whispering tile and a sick feeling in his gut. She stared at him, her chest heaving, the fight slowly draining from her to be replaced by a devastated confusion. She saw not a strategist, but a frightened boy asking for faith he hadn't earned. A few hours later, the Blackwood family butler found them in the common room, his face ashen. Mr. Warren, there's been an accident. As the butler relayed the horrific details, the delayed anaphylactic shock, the honeyberries, the vanilla masking the taste, Nathan felt the world tilt. He saw the mosaic tile, heard the whispered suggestion. Honeyberry biscuits. He looked at Nora. Her initial shock was morphing into dawning, horrified comprehension. Her eyes, wide and fixed on him, traced back every step. The sudden invitation to coffee. His strange, specific purchase. His plea for trust. It wasn't a surrender. It was a trap. A perfectly laid, undetectable trap. The obstacle hadn't just been removed. It had been neutralized with surgical, immoral precision. And the unassuming, seemingly powerless boy in front of her had been the instrument. The fury, the accusation, the pity, all of it evaporated from Nora's expression, replaced by a profound, unsettling awe. She wasn't looking at a victim anymore. She was looking at something far more dangerous and far more effective than Blake Warren could ever have been. As the butler's words hung in the air, honeyberries, vanilla, paralysis, Nathan's gaze was locked on Nora. He saw the moment of horrified comprehension dawn in her eyes, followed by a swift, terrible reassessment of him. This is it, he thought, his heart sinking like a stone. She'll see a monster. Someone who serves poison pastries with a smile. Someone who would maim a man to get what he wants. She'll run, and she'll be right too. He braced for the recoil, the disgust, the fear. But it didn't come. Instead, the shock in Nora's eyes melted, not into revulsion, but into a profound, blazing clarity. The color returned to her cheeks, not with shame, but with fierce, vindicated energy. She stepped closer to him, her voice a low, intense whisper meant only for his ears. You knew, she breathed, not with accusation, but with awe. You knew about the allergy. You knew. Nathan opened his mouth to deny it, to explain the whispers, the terrifying lack of his own knowledge, but the words died. Her interpretation was a shield he hadn't earned, but she was handing it to him. You didn't surrender, she said, her hand finding his and gripping it with surprising strength. You walked him to the gallows and made him thank you for the rope. You ended it. Permanently. She didn't see a monster. She saw a savior who had done the ugly, necessary thing she hadn't had the means to do herself. In her gilded cage, she'd only ever seen blunt force or surrender. Nathan had just shown her a third option, elegant, ruthless annihilation. The reality was the opposite of his fear. She didn't pull away. She held on tighter, looking at him not with horror, but with a respect so deep it bordered on reverence. In her world of power, what he had just accomplished, whether he understood it or not, was the ultimate proof of worth. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't ruin. It was a precise, permanent correction, a neutralized force. The council hadn't just given him a tool. They had engineered the entire encounter, knowing the exact, hidden flaw in their target. Nora was free. The merger would collapse. The obstacle was removed with surgical, immoral precision. Nathan walked to his room in a daze. He stared at the wall. For a long time, nothing. Then, the plaster darkened and coalesced into the familiar, grotesque demon's face. It didn't speak. It just waited, its smoldering pit eyes fixed on him. Why? Nathan finally rasped, the word tearing from his throat. Why use such cruel precision? There had to be another way. He rambled, his voice cracking with a mix of horror and desperate righteousness. We could have exposed him, ruined the merger another way. There are laws, there's morality. You can't just maim someone. It's not right. The demonic face watched his human anguish, unmoved. When he ran out of breath, it spoke, its voice not a roar, but a dry, logical rustle. Countless souls flicker out each day, little seer. From sickness, from violence, from time. One more is a statistical irrelevance. For one like him, it is less. A correction. You don't get to decide that. We did not decide. We observed. The war in Sion was a predator. The girls from families too poor to fight back, the rivals removed by convenient accidents. His history is a ledger written in other people's suffering. You fret over his left side. He erased entire futures. Nathan shook his head, trying to cling to his crumbling sense of justice. That's for courts to decide. Not whispers in walls. The face seemed almost to sigh, a whisper of dust from a crack. Morality is a human weather vane, spinning with the wind of your era. What is monstrous to you now was commonplace 2 centuries ago. Our perspective is longer. We see patterns, consequences, equilibriums. Your right and wrong are fleeting colors to us. We act to preserve a balance you are not yet equipped to perceive. It began to soften, blending back into the wall. You asked for a tool to save the heiress. We gave you the most efficient one. The tool worked. The balance is restored. Mourn your human morality if you must. But do not blame the scalpel for the surgeon's work. Then it was gone. The victory was absolute. The cost was not just a piece of his soul, but the very framework of right and wrong that had held it. The silent council hadn't just withdrawn. They had shown him the abyss of their logic, and left him standing on its edge, forever knowing he had been their perfect, unwitting scalpel. Danger speaks in whispers. Novella Station lets you hear them loud. Epilogue, Equilibrium. The Warrens' retribution was a storm of lawyers, financial pressure, and shadowy threats. It broke against a newly fortified shore. Every corporate move against Miller interests was met with a larger, colder countermove from Dean Blackwood, who had found a thrilling new purpose in his extended life. Thugs sent to intimidate Nathan found themselves lost, disoriented, and maimed by freak accidents after hearing strange whispers in alleyways. When a hired arsonist approached the Miller estate, he was found the next morning, unharmed but babbling about faces in the flames. Charlie, learning Nathan was a target, did not send thugs. He sent miasmas. For months, no member of the Warren family slept through the night, plagued by waking nightmares and a persistent, itching rash no doctor could cure. It was a message, written on their own skin, we can touch you anywhere. The final Warren gambit was the courtroom. They charged Nathan with involuntary manslaughter, a public scorched earth policy. It was their greatest miscalculation. Nathan's defense was a tapestry woven from the very connections the council had urged him to build. He was not a monster, but a boy trying to be a good host with expensive, rare cookies. How could he have known? Principal Sterling spoke of integrity and a recovered family legacy. Old Man Clay, a decorated former sergeant, delivered testimony on Nathan's character that made the jury sit straighter. Letters poured in from Mr. Heiress the shopkeeper, from farmers, from people whose small crises a quiet boy had once helped solve. Ava Sterling, née Henderson, stated the honeyberries were a celebrated delicacy, not a weapon. The case collapsed. Nathan walked free, not just acquitted, but vindicated. Dorothy watched the parade of witnesses with a stunned, swelling pride. She had built walls of money and will, but her grandson had built a fortress of loyalty. Dean Blackwood knew a deeper truth, the ruthless, elegant strike that had felled Blake. He saw in it not monstrosity, but the necessary calculus of their world. He summoned Nora's chastened parents and restructured the Blackwood future. Their son was sidelined with a generous trust fund. Nora was named the rightful heir. Through it all, the voices still whispered. Nathan listened, but now with a philosopher's ear, studying ethics and moral philosophy alongside his physics, trying to reconcile the cold equations of the patterns with the warm, messy weight of a human heart. 2 years later, on a terrace overlooking gardens owned jointly by the Miller and Blackwood families, the two clans met in quiet, hard-won peace. Under a twilight sky, Nathan Miller and Nora Blackwood made their announcement. It was not a grand spectacle. It was a quiet affirmation of an alliance forged in secrets, defended with precision, and chosen, against all odds, by two people who had seen each other's darkest capacities and deepest loyalties. and had chosen to build a future together anyway. The engagement ring caught the last of the light. In its facets, if one knew how to look, the briefest pattern might have flickered: a fox, a knight, a kind old man. Before winking out, their work finally, perfectly done. Pause your life, not stories. The next part is coming faster than whispers of the silent council, so don't touch that unsubscribe button. The chaos continues in the next episode.